About 10,000 people work for the Saskatchewan Public Service. Employees are located throughout the province, from Uranium City to East End, and just about everywhere in between. Men and women employed by the Saskatchewan government work in an incredible diversity of occupations. Most of the government's employees are represented by the Saskatchewan Government Employees Union, the SGEU. The past history of relations between the SGEU and the government has been adversarial and confrontational. The serious financial problems faced by the government have resulted in downsizing. Devolution initiatives, co-management agreements, and new partnerships have created an uncertain, rancorous labor relations climate. The provincial government workplace was not immune to the sweeping structural change brought about by globalization and the onslaught of information technology. The perception of low employee morale levels was widespread.
I think the relationship between the SGU and the Government of Saskatchewan over the last 20 years has been rocky. It's had a minimum amount of respect, and it at times has been openly hostile toward each other. And not a positive relationship is how I would characterize the one that we've had.
I'd agree, and the trend, the tendency has always been to not pick the fights that you need to pick. It just, everything was a fight. It didn't matter whether it was an overtime situation or a riot in the Saskatoon Correctional Center. We dealt with all of them the same way, and it took forever to get a resolution, and many times it was a third-party resolution. We're moving in the direction now where we have to be able to identify what are problems, and once we've decided it's a problem, move in a direction to fix it without all the gnashing of teeth and dragging of feet.
Traditional bargaining techniques pitted union against management. In 1993, a bitter 4-month strike was endured prior to the conclusion of the last round of collective bargaining.
Cuts have infuriated people. They've caused an awful lot of anxiety and apprehension in the membership again. And I think in the long term, we're going to have to deal with that.
The strike was a lose-lose situation. One thing that was gained from the strike was a realization by both sides that a different way of doing business had to be found.
After the last round of collective bargaining, and as part of the last collective agreement, we put in the collective agreement a proposal to have union management committees in every department. The employees basically felt, and the employer and everyone involved in the relationship, that we'd been in an adversarial relationship for a long time, and nobody was benefiting from it. A 4.5-month strike brought that all to a head. People were fed up. Employees wanted input into the operations of the employer. They wanted input in how they did their jobs, and we had to find a new way to do that. We had to find a new way to relate those types of concerns.
I think the turning point for us was probably January 6th and 7th, where we got a whole bunch of senior officials from government and senior elected officials in the union, and put them all in the same room together, with a lot of cynicism walking in the door, but put the question right at everybody, saying, you know, is this the way we want to live together? How do we want to live together? I mean, because we were coming off of what Kevin talked about here. You know, 4.5-month strike, everybody's feeling pretty bitter about it and stuff like that, and management was fed up. They didn't want to go through this again. Employees were fed up. The union wasn't happy with it, and I don't think anybody was. I mean, is this what is there more of this?
Was it the best it could be?
Is that the best it could be? So I think there was, you know, maybe if there was anything good thing come out of the strike is the fact that people just said, well, you know, it commonly happens in these sorts of situations. People look at each other and say, there's got to be a better way, and I think we sort of hit that.
On January 6th and 7th, 1994, 75 SGEU and management representatives met in Regina to discuss the present and the desired relationship between the employer, its employees, and their union. The union and management agreed on 6 objectives for this meeting: to develop increased understanding of the issues, to develop increased respect, to move the UMCs forward, to learn more about organizational change, and to develop goals for the process. The facilitator was Mac Roberts from Mac Roberts and Associates from Ontario.
because I think we
Opening
should do
comments were made by
just go to
George
each other.
Rosenau, past president of the
And the other thing you can do
SGEU.
in the first one is get to know each other.
And Saskatchewan people have always had a strong desire to run their own affairs. And I think SGU is a reflection of these values. Certainly, unlike many other unions, they do not pay their presidents great big glossy salaries. And they certainly want to be involved. They want a sense of ownership of what they are doing. And again, I think it's because of our rural values that this has occurred. It is a strength that we should not ignore, but instead take advantage of. But I wish to raise a concern that for many of us, it may be hard to commit to this current initiative. After all, you're looking at a membership of government workers who've been cut back, frozen, privatized, early retired, contracted out, decentralized, and now devolved and reformed. Instead of cooperation, we feel that we've been co-opted. So I ask, please excuse us if we may seem somewhat skeptical or perhaps even cynical. But despite this, I have a profound pride in the tradition of Saskatchewan's public sector and feel we deliver a pretty good service to the people of Saskatchewan. Services that are very important to the people and the province's future. And it is my hope that this is a process that will take advantage of the social, economic, and political history of this province, but more importantly, our need to cooperate, not compete.
75% of the activities took place in subgroups of 10 to 15 people. The subgroups were given structured questions in a process designed to maximize the dialogue and learning. Topics discussed included issues and opportunities in the public service that related to improving service and employees' jobs. The people in the subgroups also explored the nature, purpose, and role of the union and of management in guiding the future of the process.
I think that what we're looking at is ways and means of improving relationships. Now, a goal that we may well both have, that obviously can be worked at through a UMAC committee, is looking at some of the employment security items, because it's like Gerald was saying, as far as we're concerned, that if you're looking at program implementation and reorganization of service delivery, we would hope that we would be able to put forward alternatives to job loss at the departmental level, because that's what those UMAC committees, or one of the functions of those UMAC committees. There may well be other ways and means of doing things. I don't know what they are right now. So why don't you take 5 off?
But I hear too many times in the last 2 days I've heard about downsizing and things like that. And if I'm here to take part in formations of UMAC committees, to go back and support them talking about downsizing that, I'm not in favor of that. And I don't even want to be here, to be honest, if that's what this is going to entail. I'm totally opposed to that. I think UMAC committees can do a damn good job of solving problems in the departments. But if we're going to start discussing downsizing, I don't want it to be part of it.
Let's be fair and open with one another. We can't talk about change if the only kind of change you want to talk about is good news. I mean, the way it was described about how we mitigate. Let's say that our very last solution is, quote, downsizing or job loss. You know, and we looked at every other option. I agree with that. We should do that. We should do that together. But at the end of the day, if after fair, we're not there yet, and George said yesterday morning, people come here with distrust and cynicism. 2 days aren't going to change that. But down the road, if in fact there is some mutual respect and trust developed, and everybody's had the same information, and we've explored and beaten the hell out of all the options, and there's an option that none of us like very much, but maybe it has, quote, bad news in it, we can't cherry pick in this new partnership and say, well, I don't want anything to do with the bad news, folks.
Both sides have to remember that they come into the committee meetings, to the UMAC, with the problem, not their edict of what the solution is. You come in with a problem and say, now, let's talk about how we can collectively deal with this. And if the problem that's brought in is our budget is cut, how are we going to now deliver our service? Then the last thing that we have to look at, the very last thing on that list is an option, is downsize. And there's got to be a recognition that if that's something our UMAC is going to deal with, that's the way it's got to be dealt with.
Here's how, Randy and I and others were involved in the highways one. But here's how I'm still going to be the Deputy Minister of the Department of Environment and Resource Management. It's still going to be my responsibility, ultimately, to make final decisions. But what I do is, I'm trying to get the best possible decision, which takes into account all of the information that's out there, all of the expertise that's out there, and try to make the best possible decision. And I need to do that, I need the best possible information. And to do that, I need to talk to the people who are doing the job and know how to do the job and know how to do the job better. And how I see the issue of a budget being dealt with within the context of a UMAC is, the problem is brought to the UMAC, saying this is the overall objective which the cabinet has defined for us for this next year's budget. How can we go about achieving that bottom line and still maintain quality service? What are all of the possible ways that we can utilize to arrive at that objective?
One of the things I think that we got a problem with here is that if a decision is made by cabinet, as you say, or by the government, and then the departments have to act on it, and that decision may be one that none of us agree with. It may be a cutting decision, a budgetary decision that could result in some way the department has to run more efficiently in order to save money. Now, at the UMAC committee, we may have people who are willing to participate in trying to find a way that they can run the department more efficiently and save that money. But when it gets to a situation where it starts to impact on the collective agreement or starts to impact on members' jobs, then we're going to want to preserve the right to go after the original decision.
At the end of the first day, former minister responsible for public sector bargaining, Bob Mitchell, brought greetings from the government and talked about the new process.
I, of course, know that these matters can't be solved in a two-day meeting, and I know that a two-day meeting will not dramatically alter the existing relationship between the union and the management and the government. But I believe, and I sincerely believe, that we are at the threshold of an opportunity to do something important, to introduce some really positive changes in the public service of this province. There are any number of issues and problems and challenges that we all face, no matter what our role in the public sector of this province. And we have no choice but to confront these issues and problems and challenges. Our past stands in our way. I have great respect for the people in this room, many of whom I know personally, and I believe that this group will be able to do some of the things that I've suggested, to develop creative new ideas for working together, and that these ideas have the potential of improving the lives of all of the people who work in the public service of this province. Good luck.
Participants at the conference increased their understanding of issues facing the public service, developed an increased respect for each other's role, developed a framework for improving relationships, agreed to an action plan to meet agreed-upon objectives, and discovered that they wanted positive change in the public service. During the following months, the relationship between union and management changed. Both parties agreed to shift the focus of their collective bargaining process from the traditional adversarial format to one that used the principles of an interest-based approach. Rick McKillop, Executive Director of Employee Relations at the Public Service Commission, talks about what happened after the January 6th meeting.
One of the significant outcomes of the January 1994 meetings was achieving general consensus that the notion of joint union management committees was worthy of further pursuit. The meeting of '94 created the need for a steering committee to move the process forward. representatives were appointed to the steering committee, and the committee met throughout the spring of 1994, ultimately concluding with the drafting of a letter of understanding, which laid out a framework for the development of and operation of union management committees, both at the departmental level and centrally. That letter of understanding was ultimately signed between the parties in August of '94. In turn, then, the departments that hadn't already established union management committees were asked to get those committees into place over the fall of '94, which meant that management had to appoint their representatives to the committee and begin to work with the union in ensuring that appropriate union officials were appointed to represent their interests in the process.
The Letter of Understanding provides 5 goals that were jointly agreed to by the union and the Government of Saskatchewan: to deliver quality service to and for the public of Saskatchewan, to establish a positive and constructive relationship between the employees, union, management, and government, to improve the image of the public service, to recognize and respect the roles of employees, union, management, and government in this new relationship, and to provide a work environment that is healthy and safe for employees, management, and the public of Saskatchewan. In November of 1994, Kevin Yates and Dan Cameron attended a UMC meeting for the Department of Education. They shared with the committee the advantages of interest-based negotiations and the future roles of the UMCs.
And I suppose what we're looking to ultimately is to have what we call seamlessness, and that is that we have the same sort of attitude at work with the problems we have here. If our issues are operational problems or employee problems are brought here, it's really a case of getting into a problem-solving mode with people, and not a bargaining mode per se, but this is the issue. Well, fine, what are your interests around that? And an interest is the kind of thing that says, well, if we're going to find an answer to this, these are the kind of considerations to be taken into account. Employees' interests, management's interests. Now, can we find an answer that seems to grab all those interests, that incorporates all those interests within them? So we're trying to look at sort of a way of problem solving at our main table that we can also, it's operating, it's useful on a day-to-day basis in union management committees or just when managers deal with employees.
I think one of the other outcomes of this process is going to be is that there'll be union management committees is also the union proper letting go of some of its traditional top-down decision-making, and that the union is in fact the employees, and the groups like this can have input into their work and have the resolutions of problems or decisions made at the local where the problem or at the local level where the problem in fact originates from, and that people then can't just necessarily push it off through agreements or whatnot. They have to resolve a problem, because often a grievance doesn't resolve the problem. There's still the hard feelings that go with the resolution of a grievance, that there has to be a winner or a loser, or there's a perception of a winner or a loser, and there's not real attempts to problem solve. And union management committees and the whole new direction we're going on in grievances, again, some of the things that are going on the collective bargaining table, we're moving the whole dispute resolution process into a mediation type format if we can't resolve issues prior to going to arbitration, because clearly what you want to resolve is the problem. And if grievance often leaves the feelings behind on one side or the other, and sometimes you have to resolve all the issues, which includes the feelings that go with the resolution of a problem.
Union management committees have been established within all departments and some agencies of the provincial government.
I think we've seen decreases in grievances and disputes between the parties on a lot of issues, and we've moved towards dealing with our problems in a proactive way versus reactive in most instances. Not in all, but like any new process, in the majority of times we've tried to resolve them up front and in a proactive way.
I think we both acknowledge we're at the beginning of something. We're not quite sure where ultimately what it'll look like at the end, and we realize that it's new things, and every step you risk something, sort of thing. There are risks in doing what we do. It's not clear, so what the answers are and so on. We know we're at a very early stage. We know we're still rooted in the past, but at least we're making some steps hesitantly but very gradually towards something different.
Within the
Frank Bogdasevich, Deputy Minister to the Premier, talked about where the union management committees fit in with the future vision for government.
I see the management, the union management committees in the departments of agency of government as being a possible source of both individual ideas and advancing the agenda for the kind of management change that we require. I have felt this way a very long time. I am therefore extremely anxious to see this union management structure emerge and to see what comes out of it. I realize that there are also agenda items from unions' perspective, from employees' perspective, from management's perspective that may be a little less collegial. They will each have their own agenda. Some of this may emerge as an effective working relationship through this committee structure. So I'm saying that not only the overall kinds of management agendas that we have to work at inside government, but the more specialized interests of each of these groups will be better served through this kind of committee, the determination of what those are and their resolution. I'm not naive. That's difficult, and the working relationships can be tested. But this, I hope, structure will be able to accommodate those special interests and allow, as I've said, the public service and public servants, wherever they work in government, to be given the opportunity to, and really to take command of, the kind of managerialism wherever you fit into that structure, because one way or another we're all part of managing programs.
On January 26th and 27th, 1995, members of all departmental union management committees met in Regina. In all, more than 175 people gathered to help get the union management committees up and running in all departments. A helpful part of the first morning's activities was when representatives from long-standing UMCs at Social Services and Highways and Transportation shared their experiences with the audience. Some employees on different departmental union management committees had never actually met each other, let alone serve on a UMC, when the meeting started. A team from Mediation Services at Justice then took the entire group through an intensive course in the use of interest-based problem solving, a key ingredient of successful UMC operation. The two-day meeting wrapped up with each department's union management committee getting together and beginning to talk about issues, opportunities, and to begin to develop an action plan. Closing comments were made by SGEU President Barry Nowosielski.
It's been a relatively short period of time that this new relationship between the union, the management, and the employees has taken place. And I guess I see strength and I see some solidarity coming in what I've seen here in the last day. I'm hopeful that this new relationship will continue and we can build and go on from there. I, as the president of this union, believe that job security and sticking up for the members of the union is what I'm there for, and I'll continue to do that. But I also believe that there is a new way of doing business, though, and I support it. I support these UMAC committees wholeheartedly, but there has to be a commitment from management and from the union side of it. The employees out there, as employees, we want say in the departments. We want to know what's going on in the financial end of it and every aspect of it. And we know that's going to take change on our part also. But management also has to realize that they got to change. There's a lot of old management styles out there and practices that we don't want to live with anymore. And we've seen that the government and the Public Service Commission and management as a whole, the majority of them are willing to change. And I can assure you that as employees in this government, we are also willing to change for the better. I guess in closing, I'd just like to say that I'd encourage everybody here to go back and put in an honest effort to make this work. The commitment has to be there, and you have to demonstrate it amongst the departments that you work for.
Armed with their action plan, the departmental UMCs returned to their departments and started work on some of the many issues facing public servants today.
You know, I've been involved in the bargaining process for the last few years, and I think that the way things were going before was just not effective. And in what I do in my line of work, I feel that laying your cards on the table and working towards a solution together is a lot more productive than playing your cards close to your chest and saying, well, you show me what you got and I'll show you what I got. And let's try and keep secrets. That hasn't worked, and I think that this process has got all kinds of potential.
Well, I thought the conference was a really good introduction for people to attend. In my department, we're just starting our UMAC, and we're only going to have one because we're a small department, but we certainly view this as being a step in the right direction. We think that it's going to be quite positive for our employees because we've been, over the last 2 years, using a fair amount of processes already to involve our employees in decision-making, and we view this as being an evolution along that path.
The way that we see as far as with dealing with relationship and having employee involvement and making joint decisions, we see this as a really positive at this stage. And it'll just be a matter of time to make sure that we try to continue that process and hear both sides equally and make sure that we try to work together instead of the adversarial effect that we had before and not communicating clearly to one another.
It's a very positive approach to solving problems. I think the potential here of solving problems locally versus having them go to another level and arbitrarily solve for you is going to lead to a lot happier people, more satisfied people in the workplace. Potential is only limited by the people that are involved in it, so we'll see where it goes from there.
In early 1995, a new collective agreement will be signed between the union and the Government of Saskatchewan using interest-based negotiations. For further information on the union management committees or interest-based negotiations, please contact the Saskatchewan Government Employees Union or the Saskatchewan Public Service Commission.